Drone incident sparks NATO alert. Sweden intercepts suspected Russian drone near French carrier Charles de Gaulle in major security incident. In a striking security breach Friday, Swedish authorities intercepted a suspected Russian drone that appeared to be heading directly toward the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle while it was docked in Malmo. The incident forced a NATO scramble and raised serious concerns over military escalation near European waters. Now let's dive deeper and explore every layer of this story on our AI podcast.
I want you to picture a scene.
Okay.
Honestly, it feels like the opening sequence of a techno thriller.
Right. Like something straight out of a spy novel.
Exactly. But this isn't fiction. This actually happened last Friday.
Yeah.
You are in Malmö, Sweden. It's a crisp, calm day at the harbor. The water is effectively glass.
Setting the scene.
I am. Because sitting there, just absolutely dominating the skyline, is an 800-foot nuclear-powered beast.
And, we aren't talking about a cruise ship here.
No.
That is the Charles de Gaulle. It's the flagship of the French Navy.
Which is a massive deal.
It is. It's a vessel that carries enough firepower to level a small nation.
Right, so it is sitting there looking completely invincible, a real symbol of absolute power.
Yeah.
But then the local radar arrays pick up something small.
Something that shouldn't be there.
Exactly. It's unmanned. And it's not just drifting on the wind or anything. It is making a direct, calculated beeline for this massive nuclear vessel.
And I think in that exact moment, the situation shifts from what was just a standard diplomatic naval exercise to, well, what intelligence communities are now calling the Baltic breach.
Welcome back to the deep dive.
Great to be here.
We have a massive stack of reports, intelligence briefings, and analysis on the table today.
A lot of source material to get through.
A lot. And we are obviously going to unpack this specific incident in Sweden because the details are just wild.
Truly sci-fi stuff in there.
Yeah. But as always, we aren't just looking at the single event. Our mission today is to look at the ecosystem it lives in.
Because you really can't look at a drone in Malmö in total isolation. If you do, you just completely miss the broader story.
Right.
You have to connect that drone to the massive escalation in nuclear rhetoric we're hearing from Moscow this week.
Which we will get into.
You have to connect it to the, frankly, staggering casualty numbers coming out of the war in Ukraine and the very fragile state of international diplomacy as this conflict drags into its fifth year.
Yeah, 2026. It feels like the temperature just got turned up another 10 degrees across the entire continent.
It really does.
So let's start with the hardware. The Charles de Gaulle. I feel like unless you are a naval enthusiast or maybe a francophile, you might not realize just how big of a deal this specific ship is.
Right.
Why is it such a high-value target?
Well, it is a massive deal. The Charles de Gaulle is unique in the global naval order. It is literally the only nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the world that does not belong to the United States Navy.
Wow.
Yeah, that puts France in a very exclusive club.
So it's not just a boat, it's a statement.
It is a floating symbol of European strategic autonomy and NATO power. We are talking about a vessel that carries around 2,000 sailors.
2,000.
Right, plus highly sophisticated radar suites, and it has the capacity to launch up to 30 Rafale fighter jets.
Okay.
These are top-tier nuclear-capable aircraft.
So essentially it's a floating city with a nuclear reactor in the basement and an air force on the roof.
That is a very fair description, and context is everything here.
Right. Why was it in Sweden?
It was docked in Sweden for a strategic exercise. Sweden, having relatively recently joined NATO, is hosting this massive French asset as a show of cooperation.
A symbol of unity.
Exactly. It's a signal saying, we are here, we are ready.
And then the intruder shows up to crash the party.
Yeah.
Break down the timeline for us. What exactly happened on Friday in that harbor?
So Swedish authorities detected an unmanned aerial vehicle, a drone. Now, obviously, in 2026, drones are everywhere.
Sure. Commercial drones, delivery tests.
Hobbyists, exactly. But the flight path was the dead giveaway here. According to Swedish Defense Forces, this wasn't some kid taking pictures of the sunset.
Right.
They tracked the trajectory, and they firmly believe this drone took off from a nearby Russian vessel.
A Russian vessel.
Yes, one that was operating in international waters just outside the harbor limits.
That is incredibly bold. Launching from a ship that close to a NATO harbor.
Extremely bold. It implies a very high degree of coordination and intent. And once it was airborne, it didn't wander around. It locked in.
It knew where it was going.
It headed directly toward the Charles de Gaulle. That obviously caused immediate alarm among the Allied naval and air defense units stationed there.
I can imagine.
You have to understand, the rules of engagement in a situation like this are incredibly tense. You have an unidentified object flying toward a nuclear-powered asset in a highly populated city harbor.
That is the nightmare scenario. Because, I mean, think about it. If you shoot it, where does the debris land?
Exactly. Downtown Malmo.
But if you don't shoot it, what if it's armed? What if it crashes right into the flight deck?
Then you have a potential radiological incident or a mass casualty event.
And that is the calculus those commanders had to make in seconds.
Right. And this is where the story gets technically fascinating to me.
This is the sci-fi part.
It is. They didn't use a kinetic solution. They didn't fire a missile or use those close-in weapon systems like a phalanx gun.
Because firing a missile in downtown Malmo is generally frowned upon.
It carries unacceptable risks of collateral damage. So instead, Swedish operatives utilized an electronic jamming operation.
Okay, we hear this term thrown around in movies all the time.
Right, jamming the radar.
But the reality of modern naval electronic warfare is way more sophisticated than just making static noise, right? Unpack that for us.
Think of it less like noise and more like a directed energy weapon.
Okay.
The drone relies on a specific frequency to talk to its pilot. That's the data link. And it likely uses GPS signals to know exactly where it is in the air.
Right.
The Swedish countermeasures likely flooded those specific frequencies with overwhelming energy.
Kind of like shining a massive spotlight into someone's eyes so they can't see anything else.
That's a great analogy. A spotlight that is 1,000,000 times brighter than what the eye can handle. They sever the connection between the device and its control grid.
Wow.
They effectively blind the drone's sensors and deafen its communication ears simultaneously. In the military, it's called a soft kill.
A soft kill. That almost implies the hardware is completely intact, but the brain is lobotomized.
In a sense, yes. Once that connection was severed, the drone just disappeared from radar.
Just gone.
The assumption in the reports is that its fail-safes kicked in. Most military-grade drones are programmed to either hover, return to home, or land immediately if the link is lost.
And since it vanished...
Given it vanished from the scopes, it likely crashed into the sea. Or the connection was cut so abruptly it just spiraled out of control. We don't know for sure where it ended up, but the threat was neutralized without a single shot being fired.
It's incredible technology, but it's also terrifyingly close.
Very close.
If that jammer fails, or if the drone is fully autonomous and doesn't even need a signal...
Then you have a kinetic impact on a nuclear carrier.
Yeah. And looking at the bigger picture here, this feels incredibly aggressive. This isn't some proxy skirmish in a disputed border town in eastern Ukraine.
No.
This is a direct interaction between Russian hardware and a major French nuclear asset in Swedish waters.
It is extremely aggressive, and it highlights how the front line of this conflict is totally blurring.
Right.
We often think of the war as being over there, in the Donbass, but Malmo isn't a war zone. Sweden is a stable nation.
Of course.
By flying a drone at the Charles de Gaulle, the signal being sent is that no asset, no matter where it is docked, is off limits. It creates a psychological pressure that extends far beyond the actual battlefield.
And that psychological pressure really seems to be the operating system for Moscow right now.
Yes.
It's what experts call hybrid warfare, right? It's not just bullets, it's fear, it's information, it's cyber.
Hybrid warfare is the perfect term for it. You mix physical harassment like the drone with intense information warfare.
Which brings us to the rhetoric we saw this week.
Right.
Because while the drone was buzzing the carrier, the Kremlin was buzzing the media wires with some genuinely chilling comments.
Chilling is probably an understatement. Vladimir Putin came out and explicitly warned that adversaries know how things could end if Moscow faces a nuclear confrontation.
Just a blatant threat.
It is a classic deterrent strategy, reminding the world of the ultimate stakes. But there's another layer to this war of words that we really need to unpack.
Yes, the dirty bomb claim.
It involves some very specific, very strange allegations made by Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service regarding Britain and France.
I saw this in the stack of sources, and I actually had to reread it. The wonder weapon claim.
That's the one.
Now, as always, we are just looking impartially at what the sources say here, not taking sides, just reporting the claims.
Right. It's crucial to lay out exactly what is being said.
So what are they saying?
The Russian Foreign Intelligence Service has publicly claimed that Britain and France are secretly planning to provide Ukraine with a nuclear wonder weapon or even a dirty bomb.
Okay, we need to pause on that. That's a massive accusation. They're saying Western powers are going to give Kiev nukes.
Essentially, yes. The narrative they're pushing out there is that Western elites are so desperate to secure better peace terms that they're willing to equip Ukraine with a nuclear device to force Russia's hand.
And obviously London and Paris have responded.
Categorically denied it. British and French officials have completely dismissed it as baseless misinformation.
Right.
But as analysts looking at the deep dive materials, we have to ask, why this specific lie? Why right now?
That is the million-dollar question. Is it just to stir the pot?
It is likely a strategy known as mirroring, or creating a pretext.
How does that work?
In intelligence analysis, when a state actor accuses their enemy of planning a horrific crime that the enemy really has no logical reason to commit,
Yeah.
it is often because the accuser is planning something similar themselves, or they need a justification to escalate.
So by saying NATO is preparing a dirty bomb, if Russia were to use a tactical nuclear weapon later, they could say, hey, we had to do it. They were about to attack us.
Exactly. It lays the groundwork for a defensive narrative, or at the very least, it is designed to fracture NATO unity.
Agreed.
Right. If you can make the German or Italian public terrified that Britain is about to start World War III, you weaken the alliance from the inside. Uncertainty is a weapon.
It muddies the waters. It makes everyone nervous.
And when you combine that high-stakes rhetoric with the physical drone incident in Sweden, you start to see a very clear pattern.
High tension in speech often correlates with high-risk maneuvers in the field.
Exactly. They are turning up the heat on all fronts to see who blinks first.
Which brings us to the actual physical front. The heat there isn't metaphorical at all.
No, it's very real.
We have to talk about the ground reality in Ukraine. We are entering the 5th year of this war. And the numbers we are seeing in the reports regarding Russian losses, I honestly had to check 3 different sources to make sure I wasn't seeing things.
The scale of attrition has reached a point that is historically difficult to comprehend for any modern army.
Let's look at these casualty figures. Western intelligence is estimating that Moscow is losing up to 40,000 troops per month.
We really need to contextualize that number because 40,000 can just sound like a dry statistic on a page.
Yeah.
That is the capacity of a Major League Baseball stadium. Imagine a full stadium of people gone every single month.
That seems physically unsustainable. How do you feed that machine? How does a military structure not just collapse under that kind of weight?
Many military analysts argue that you can't. Not in the long run. These figures are far beyond Russia's capacity to replace through normal recruitment drives.
What are they doing?
They are relying on massive financial incentives, emptying out prisons, and coercing migrants.
Wow.
And when you look at the total toll since the 2022 invasion began, estimates for killed and wounded are now exceeding 1.25 million people.
1.25 million.
Yeah.
That is a population of Dallas, Texas, just as casualties.
It is a staggering demographic blow. And on top of that, we are seeing real cracks in the discipline.
Right, the desertion numbers.
Reports indicate over 50,000 Russian soldiers have deserted since the invasion began. That speaks volumes to the morale and the horrific conditions on the zero line.
So here's the paradox that I really want to dig into with you.
Okay.
If they're losing a stadium's worth of people every month, if desertion is rising, if the overall toll is over 1 million, how are they still attacking? Because the reports clearly show the offensive is intensifying, not slowing down.
That is the tragic paradox of this current phase of the war. Russia has fundamentally shifted to a strategy that relies far less on skilled maneuver warfare and much more on overwhelming mass and aerial bombardment.
So relying on the skies.
Exactly. They might be struggling with manpower quality, but they still have significant stockpiles of missiles and drones, and they have really ramped up their domestic production.
The overnight numbers from the reports were massive.
Just overnight, we saw a barrage of 420 drones and 39 missiles, which included 11 ballistic missiles.
420 drones in one single night.
It's a saturation attack.
Just flood the zone.
Right. The goal isn't just to hit a specific target. It's to exhaust the air defense systems.
Make them run out of bullets.
Exactly. If Ukraine has 400 interceptor missiles and Russia launches 420 drones, some will inherently get through.
Yeah.
And these weren't just aimed at military targets. They hit civilian infrastructure and residential areas across 8 different regions.
And there were reports of civilians and children injured in those strikes.
Sadly, yes. This is exactly what Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andrei Sybiha was referring to when he said that Putin is betting on more terror, attacks, and aggression.
It's brutal strategy.
The strategy seems to be quite simple. If we can't win quickly on the ground, we will make life unlivable from the air. We will try to break the will of the entire population.
It's a grim reality. You have the Baltic breach in Sweden, the nuclear rhetoric in the press, and this absolute meat grinder attrition in Ukraine.
Yeah.
But the spillover isn't just contained to those two areas, is it? We saw something happen in Poland this week, too, which really brings NATO Article 5 into the conversation.
The ripple effects are spreading, absolutely. The Polish Armed Forces Operational Command had to scramble Allied aircraft recently.
What triggered that? Was it another drone flying off course?
No, it was a response to increased Russian aerial activity right near their border.
Okay.
Large formations of Russian jets maneuvering aggressively near Polish airspace. Now, operations did return to normal readiness after about 2 hours, but it just shows how hair-trigger the situation is.
It's like everyone is walking on eggshells, but the eggshells are made of nitroglycerin.
That's a good way to put it.
One wrong move, one pilot misinterpreting a signal, one drone drifting a few miles too far west.
And you have a direct conflict between NATO and Russia. That is the nightmare scenario that everyone has been trying to avoid for 5 solid years now. The margin for error is effectively 0 right now.
So surely this is where diplomacy steps in. We keep hearing about peace talks in Geneva. Are they actually going anywhere? Or is it just people sitting in a room staring at each other across a table?
Diplomatic efforts are ongoing, primarily in Geneva, and they are brokered largely by the U.S.
Right.
But we have to be realistic about the state of these talks in the 5th year of the war. The positions have hardened into absolute concrete.
What is the main sticking point at this stage? Is it land? Is it future security guarantees?
It's trust and survival. The Ukrainian delegations who are representing President Zelensky are consistently reaffirming that only sustained military and economic pressure will work.
They don't want a ceasefire.
They argue that any pause or ceasefire without a total Russian withdrawal is just a trap.
A chance to rebuild.
Yes. It gives Moscow time to rest, repair that badly broken army, and attack again in 2 years.
So they see a ceasefire as just hitting the pause button on the VCR, not turning off the movie.
Exactly. And conversely, Putin genuinely believes he can outlast the West's attention span. He thinks that if he just keeps the meat grinder going, eventually Europe and the U.S. will fold.
And from his command center in Kyiv, Zelensky issued a pretty stark warning on the eve of the war's anniversary.
He did. He warned that Putin must be stopped before this escalates into a broader global confrontation. And when you look at the drone in Sweden targeting a French ship and the jets over Poland, it feels less like a warning from Zelensky and more like a description of what is already happening.
It's a lot to process. We started this deep dive with a single drone in a quiet harbor and ended up with the potential for global conflict.
But that is the nature of this situation.
Yeah.
These things are all deeply connected.
Right.
The drone incident in Malmö wasn't an accident, it was a test. The dirty bomb claims aren't just random words, they are strategic cover.
The rhetoric matches the action.
The missile barrages in Ukraine aren't just military tactics, they are terror campaigns. They are all pieces of a single, desperate, and very dangerous puzzle.
So let's bring this back to you, the listener. Why should someone commuting to work in Ohio or London or Sydney care about a jammer used on a dock in Sweden?
Because it shows that the safety buffers are gone. The Atlantic and the Baltic Sea used to feel like safe distances.
They don't anymore.
But when you have a drone targeting a nuclear carrier in a friendly harbor, it brings the reality of the war right to Europe's doorstep. That electronic jamming saved the day, but it represents a terrifyingly close call.
Yeah.
We are one failed jammer away from a very different world.
It's the difference between a news story and a global catastrophe.
Precisely. And it raises a fundamental question about the adversary we are all watching.
Always is.
Well, think about it. If Russia is losing 40,000 troops a month, facing mass desertions, and relying on terror tactics against civilians, are these the moves of a superpower confidently flexing its muscles?
No war.
Or are they the unpredictable, high-risk gambles of a force that feels it has absolutely nothing left to lose?
That is a very disturbing thought to leave us with. Strength or desperation. And honestly, I'm not sure which one is more dangerous when nuclear assets are involved.
Usually, looking back at history, it's desperation.
We will leave you to mull that over. As always, thank you for diving deep with us. Stay curious, stay informed, and we will catch you on the next one.
Okay, one question for you. Was the suspected Russian drone's direct approach toward the French aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle a calculated act of provocation by Moscow? And how should NATO respond to prevent further escalation? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.